Just saw the note, Scott Grayson, that Trent Williams going to be back in the trenches for the Redskins as they get their left tackle back. And we spoke earlier about Jordan Reed and whether or not he will play, but we'll get into all that now as we visit with Josh Paunil from PhillyMag.com, Birds 24/7. And probably first and foremost, Josh, well, welcome to the program.
Thank you, guys.
Glad to have you on. And first and foremost, I guess I'd want to start off with some of the discussion that's coming out of the NovaCare complex this week. On Monday, Doug was asked if he really honestly could say that all his players gave 100% in the loss to Cincinnati, and he admitted that he didn't think they did. Well, that stirred it up. What was the reaction of some of the players when they learned what their head coach said?
Shock. I mean, quite literally, they were shocked. Because first of all, just to say that it's not the wisest move to make, because it really puts your players in a tough situation. All of them, the ones that that didn't just play their hardest, but try to go the extra mile. Every player has to answer, did you guys give full effort? And you either say yes, which is not a good look because you disagree with your head coach, or you say no, and then your teammates get upset with you. So it really puts all the players in a tough situation when a coach says something like that. And there really is no upside to a coach publicly saying that. Now, if a coach feels that way, he can make that point privately. So it was definitely something that players were not thrilled about him saying publicly, and they were quite shocked about it.
Is that something where he's pressured into that, Josh, when he's asked at his Monday briefing, or is that a conscious decision in your mind that you think he makes, like, you know what, I'm just going to let the cat out of the bag and I'm going to say this here?
I think it was a slip-up because he was asked that almost the exact same question, I want to say at least twice, maybe even 3 times before that. I believe that was the second to last question of the press conference, and we had already went over that several times, and I think it was just a slip-up. If it was a conscious decision to say something like that, he would have said it, the first or the second time he was asked it. So I think it was just a slip-up of him, not, I don't want to say not being in control of the message he wanted to send, but I definitely don't think he went into that press conference thinking, okay, I'm going to say this.
Well, and I know you spoke to a couple players that Eagles fans have singled out as maybe not giving effort, Zach Ertz and Rodney McLeod, and you have that article up on PhillyMag.com, Birds 24/7. What did they have to say? And then I also saw comments from Brent Selleck that seemed to sort of smooth things over a little bit.
Yeah, well, with Zach Ertz, obviously I feel like he's the one that fans have probably criticized the most with not throwing that block. And so Zach Ertz's defense was, well, Carson was already by me, and it was, incidental to the play. It wouldn't have made an impact. He said he understood why it looked bad, and, that fans wish he would have, taken that hit. But then it was also kind of weird because he said, I didn't do this. And he said, there are all these things going through my mind. But then he added, but I won't tell you guys what was going through my head at that point. And so it was just kind of odd to throw that in there. But that was his defense, was he just thought that it was incidental to the play and that Carson was already by, which he wasn't. And you can't really, at the point when Zach Ertz made that decision, Carson Wentz was, I want to say, at least 5 yards to being out of bounds. And then obviously in football, you never know what's going to happen. You don't want a guy just, not making a block because, oh, well, it might not have an impact, especially when it's your quarterback. And I think that's the biggest thing was it was the quarterback, and that was the guy that, of all players on your team, your teammates want you to protect. And as for Rodney McLeod, he wasn't upset specifically with fans or media, but he was just upset in general that his work ethic or his effort was put into question. I actually, while I don't buy Zach Ertz's defense, I completely buy Rodney McLeod for 2 reasons. A, just because of his track record. He's a guy, Rodney McLeod's one of the last guys, just in general, in any play, I would question in terms of his effort. But also specifically on that play, I think it was just a bad play. I don't think it was, he gave up on it or he didn't care or he didn't try. It was the first quarter. I want to say it was, I don't know if it was 3-0, but it was first quarter, the game was close. And I think he just kind of got caught flat-footed. And he, his responsibility was to the outside. And I think that he legitimately thought the ball was going to bounce outside. as that play, I believe, is designed to do. And then as for Brent Selleck, he took what I thought was the most media-savvy approach, which was, well, Doug didn't mean to say that we weren't giving effort. He just meant that we could give more. And so that was his point, was, that there are levels to it, and that it's not that we weren't trying, but it's that we could, do a little bit more, and that's what we should aim for. So I thought Brent Selleck's message was actually a pretty good one and a pretty good way to kind of navigate that tricky situation his head coach put him in.
Josh Paunil of Birds 24/7 at PhillyMag.com joining PT and Scott Grayson here on the Sports Bash. Josh, when you walk around the locker room, when you're talking to the guys this week, and as you described those various answers and how guys handled it, and what you said, too, about them being, your reaction being shocked that Doug went there on Monday, is Doug Pederson in danger at all of losing this locker room? Do you think that? If not, at this point, could he, if this Redskins game goes as bad as the Bengals game did?
I mean, I guess it's definitely possible. I don't think it's necessarily likely, at least in the short term. Now, I think if the season kind of unravels, I mean, obviously that Bengals game, and that's the thing that I still don't understand, is how, even though, that Packers game, that was obviously a tough loss for the Eagles, it wasn't great for the playoff chances. Going into the Bengals game, they lost 6 of their last 8. But I still don't understand how, with 5 weeks left in the season, going into that Cincinnati game, only a game and a half out of the playoff hunt, and you can't come out with a bunch of energy. So I think that's not just a reflection of the coach. I think that's a reflection of the players, the guys they have on that team. Because I'm not saying Doug Pederson and Chip Kelly are the cream of the crop of NFL coaches, but this has happened 2 years in a row where you have situations where, now, obviously this isn't the exact same as last year. You had the Buccaneers game and the Lions game back-to-back. But this is something that I think isn't just about Doug Pederson, but it's about the players and the player leadership that they have. So I don't think he's in danger of losing the locker room, tomorrow or next week. But if the season just unravels and they lose out, and they lose out in bad form, as they did against Cincinnati, that's definitely in play.
Let me ask you this one, Josh. As you look at Doug Pederson through the first 12 games, heading in here now to the 13th, how do you evaluate him? Does it look to you like he's learning anything as a rookie head coach at this point, or is he just kind of stagnant week to week?
That's a good question. Honestly, I think it's tough to evaluate him. I mean, obviously, there's some decisions, whether it's using a timeout or challenging a play, that you can just evaluate on the surface. But for me, especially early on in the season, I really liked his play calling. I thought he should have gotten more credit than he did for Carson Wentz's early success and the type of plays that he implemented specifically for Carson, and the way he moved him out of the pocket and gave him some easy throws to establish a rhythm. But there's just very little talent that the Eagles have at skill positions on offense. And so I think it's tough, specifically for play calling and the type of offensive coach he is, because he has such little to work with, and teams adjusted to what he did earlier on the season because there wasn't much variance because he couldn't do too much. Now, as kind of just a manager of the team, it's definitely headed in the wrong direction. And so I don't think you can point to a specific area and say Doug Pederson has grown in this that's publicly apparent. Now, maybe there are ways he's grown. I'm sure there are behind the scenes, but at least from the outside looking in, it's really tough to look at anything because of just how wrong and steep of a decline the team has been on. It's not like you can come out here and say Doug Pederson is clearly a better head coach than week 1 when they're heading in the wrong direction and they have such a poor showing as they did in Cincinnati.
Very little talent, you say, Josh, as we talk with Josh Paunil from Birds 24/7, and yet the story comes out earlier in the week that Deshaun Jackson might come back to Philadelphia, and maybe the Birds have interest in him. Scott and I trying to break down how that story starts and if the Eagles, in your mind, really are interested in bringing back D-Jax.
I mean, I definitely think they'll talk, but I mean, I would say it's more likely that he goes somewhere else than he ends up in Philadelphia. I mean, I think part of it's just financially. He's early 30s receiver. Obviously, you're not that confident that he can play all 16 games for you. Now, he's definitely played the position that the Eagles badly need, and it specifically adds a dimension, that speed and that ability to take the top off of a defense that the Eagles sorely need. But given their financial constraints, but also I think another team is just simply going to overpay them. There are a lot of other teams, almost every other team in the NFL, with more cap space going forward than the Eagles do because of all that money they committed in this past offseason. So I think they'll end up with a veteran receiver, and Deshaun Jackson is in play, but I think it's more likely going to be somebody else and not necessarily Deshaun.
I know another conversation this week has been if Carson Wentz has hit the wall, and Frank Reich talked, Doug's talked a few times. What have their comments been about Carson Wentz? His play right now, his quarterback rating is absolutely awful. I know that. What have they had to say about their rookie quarterback?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of it is they're saying that obviously the production is not where you want it, but they also kind of emphasize the context of it. And obviously, they're not saying, "Oh, yeah, well, his receivers aren't any good," but I think they very much focus on, Carson could be doing this better, but relative to a guy his age and a rookie, he's way ahead of the curve, and that's a phrase that Frank Reich uses very often with Carson Wentz. Is, maybe his footwork could be better here, or this could be more consistent, but the overall theme is every rookie needs to work on that. And relative to everyone else, Carson Wentz is way ahead. And I do actually think there are valid points in that, and it's not just coach speak. There's been a lot of conversation just about Carson Wentz's mechanics and, his throwing motion and his footwork. And these are all things that every quarterback has to work through. So obviously you need to get it addressed. It's not something that you want to ignore by any means, but it's also not unusual that he's dealing with these issues. So when you compound that with the typical rookie, the footwork is off, or the throwing motion is inconsistent because he overstrides on a play, and you compound that with the lack of talent he has around him and just how everyone else is playing, that's going to give you some pretty bad production. And then the other thing is the first three games kind of, I think, gave people, I don't want to say an unrealistic expectation of what they could expect from him the rest of the season, but it definitely heightened expectations more than they were by far before the season started.
Josh, when you look at this Eagles defense right now, when they were having success, the front four was dominating. They were kind of dictating the way the game was going to be played. It's far from that in this last month, 2 months here. What do you make of this defense? And start with the front four. How do they fix not getting any pressure like they haven't been here the last few weeks?
Well, I mean, that's part of the problem is that you have guys like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham. They're getting these double teams or, this extra chip help. And then you have Connor Barwin on the other side who's getting constant one-on-ones and just not winning. And so obviously it's understandable that you look at the big money guy first. When you sign a guy like Fletcher Cox to a $100 million deal, $63 million guaranteed, one of the highest paid players in the league, you're understandably going to look at him to anchor that defensive line, but he's getting double teamed on the majority of these passing downs. And so I do think it's fair to expect him to do more. He's still playing well. Now, is he playing $100 million well? No, but he is playing pretty well. And meanwhile, you have other guys like Connor Barwin again who just isn't really giving you much, even one-on-one. It's not like Connor Barwin is getting chipped by a running back or a tight end or is getting double teamed. He's just not winning his battles. And then the other important thing is the defensive line's pass rush goes absolutely hand in hand with the coverage. One thing that opposing teams have done is they've gotten the ball out of their hands a lot quicker than they did earlier in the season. And it's been a concerted effort to just try to take advantage of the cornerbacks. They know the defensive line is going to get to them at some point, and so they're just worried about, okay, we're going to do a lot of quick game stuff, and we're just going to try to just attack all the corners. And unfortunately for the Eagles, none of the cornerbacks have responded well. Leos McKelvin, Nolan Carroll, Jalen Mills, whoever you want to name, none of them have played well in the last few games. And so it's not just the defensive line that's not playing as well as you would like, but the corners giving up such easy, quick throws, and not even, short throws. Sometimes it's intermediate and even deeper throws that quarterbacks are able to get out of their hands relatively quickly and not give the defensive line enough time. So it really is a collective team failure on that front.
Let's take a look at Leotis McKelvin specifically. You know, he's, to his credit, he's not one who's going to make excuses, or at least I haven't heard him make excuses. But his hamstring ever since week 1 has not been I mean, it just seems like it hasn't been healed. Did the Eagles mismanage him, in your opinion, at all? Should they have shut him down for a few weeks just to have him at 100% here later in the season?
Yeah, I absolutely think they should have shut him down early in the season, because that was something I didn't understand was, we would talk to Leotis McKelvin, and obviously, he badly wanted to play, but it's your obligation as an organization to just not let him. What's the point of having this guy practice and having this guy just suit up if he's 70-75%, and it's just going to hurt him long term? In my mind, almost regardless of the circumstance, unless you're about to play the Super Bowl, you just need to take a long-term approach and sit a guy in the short term so he can be healthy over the long run. But the counter to that is that Leotis McKelvin, I can't remember exactly when during the season, I want to say some point around the middle point of the season, he just came out and said, this is going to bother me the whole season. And so it's also, how much of that is because the Eagles just, had him practice and didn't sit him, and how much of that is just because of the nature of the shape of his hamstring. And I think that's a tough thing to answer. Maybe if he didn't practice, his hamstring would still be a problem. So I do think they could have handled it better, but I'm also not sure how much that would have helped, because, it's not just him running and, getting beat on deep balls that's a problem, but it's, just not playing great technique and other things at the line of scrimmage or just at the catch point that don't really have to do with his hamstring. The technique just isn't there either.
Leotis McKelvin, 31 years old. Nolan Carroll, 29 years old. We're talking with Josh Paunil from PhillyMag.com and Birds 24/7. And one of the things you came across this week, Josh, is maybe the thought that Howie Roseman sort of deserves some of the blame in this, that there were other young, promising cornerbacks, who signed one-year deals out there, and Prince of Mukamura comes to mind, or Morris Claiborne, William Gay, guys like that the Eagles missed on.
Well, yeah, and honestly, I don't even think you have to look external. I think just trading away Eric Rowe was a mistake right before the season. You see him now early on in New England, he was a healthy scratch. He just wasn't able to get on the field as he was adjusting to that system. But over the last 3 weeks, he's given up four receptions over 3 weeks, and he's been targeted like 12 times. He has 2 passes defense. I don't think he's allowed a touchdown, and he's playing most of the snaps over these past 3 weeks. Meanwhile, the Eagles cornerbacks, each of the 3 main guys, Jalen, Leotis, and Nolan, have given up at least 4 receptions in a single game. And so you have this dynamic of the Eagles corners trending downward simultaneously, while Eric Rowe, the 2015 second-round pick that they traded away just before the season, trending upward. Now, he has had a little been bitten by the injury bug, and we'll see where he goes with that. But I don't even think the mistake was necessarily, missing on a guy like Leotis McKelvin, but it's just giving up Eric Rowe so soon into his NFL career, but also not just giving him up, but giving him up for a 4th-round pick that could potentially, depending on his playing time, turn into a 3rd-round pick. But still, you didn't give him up for much, and that's a position that the Eagles really need long-term. And outside of Jalen Mills, what young corner is going to be on the roster next year?
Yeah, and as those corners struggle, the opposing quarterbacks continue to look like Hall of Famers. Of course, Aaron Rodgers probably will be in the Hall of Fame at some point, but Andy Dalton certainly played well. What formula do you come up with, Josh, for them to slow down Kirk Cousins, or are they going to make him look like all-world on Sunday?
That's a great question. I think part of it is they need to get up closer to the line of scrimmage and do a little bit more bump-and-run press coverage, because when you're playing off, and this is more so, I don't want to just say it's Leotis McKelvin that needs to do this, but Nolan Carroll, he likes to play up against the line of scrimmage a little bit more, and Leotis McKelvin, relative to Nolan, likes to play off a little bit more. But when you play off and you give guys, opposing quarterbacks, those easy 5-7 yard gains, they're going to take it every time, especially when that pass rush that the Eagles have. If teams know, okay, they're going to get here within 3 seconds, we need to get the ball out of our hands pretty quickly. And so you're just giving it to them. And now, obviously, you can't do that every play in it, and it can make certain things tougher. But I think part of it is just how disruptive the Eagles' corners are at the line of scrimmage, because it's been way too easy for quarterbacks to hit their receivers in rhythm on these short and intermediate passing routes. And then you also just have, when you look at the last game that they played, it really starts with the run, because if Washington is able to run the ball, and that's something that Jay Gruden has mentioned, is that they're really going to try to run the ball more this week than they have in the past. That just makes life so much easier for Kirk Cousins. And that's what the Eagles really struggled with in that first game, was all the rushing yards they gave up. So it starts with the run, but also it starts with the cornerback stepping up and playing better than they have the last 3 weeks. Because even if you can stop the run, if the cornerbacks play as they have recently, Kirk Cousins is going to have another field day.
So it's the part of the show, Josh, where we try to make Eagles fans feel really good about themselves here. I noticed on Birds 24/7 or PhillyMag.com here, you, Brandon, and Chris made your picks for the week, and you all picked Washington. Why does Washington beat Philly this weekend?
Well, honestly, I think just they're the better team, and at this point, I'm not confident that – I'm not sure how many teams I would pick the Eagles at this point to beat. I mean, after that showing that they had, don't get me wrong, this team has talent, and that's why I thought that Cincinnati game was so just surprising, because the Bengals, they're not a team where you can argue, oh, they're underachieving and, they're way better than their 3-8-1 record at the time. This was a team without A.J. Green, without Giovanni Bernard, and they still killed the Eagles. And so I just wonder about – it's not just about the talent disparity. I think Washington's a better team, but also just the mental state of this Eagles team. If you can't come out against that Cincinnati team and with, a potential playoff hope, potential playoff push on the line, then I'm not that confident you'll come out this week. Now, obviously, it's a division game, and that changes things a bit, but I don't know. I just don't see them beating this team. Washington hasn't been playing that well lately. Kirk Cousins has been playing pretty well, but the defense hasn't, particularly the defensive line, the safeties. So, I think it'll be a relatively close game, but just the state of this Eagles team and where they are kind of mentally going forward, I'm just not very confident in that.
Eagles-Redskins Sunday, 1 o'clock at Lincoln Financial Field. The numbers are not on the Eagles side, as the Redskins have had the Birds number the last couple of meetings. Josh Paunil, Birds 24/7. Give us a score prediction, Josh, before we let you go.
Gosh, I guess I'll go maybe 24-17, 27-20, somewhere in that range.
27-20 Redskins. Josh Paunil for Birds 24/7. PhillyMag.com does a great job of breaking down all the film and all the All-22 look. Please follow him at Josh Paunil on Twitter, and he's our guest each Thursday on the Sports Bash. Thanks so much, Josh. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, guys.